What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and last week we got arguably the most anticipated video game release of the year. People have been dubbing this particular game the GTA 6 of indie games. The game that I'm referring to, of course, is Hollow Knight Silksong. And for better or for worse, this game's release has really taken the video game world by storm. People, mostly, I would say 90% of the people that have played this game have been really enjoying it. But there's also that 10% that hasn't been super happy with it. So I want to dive into a lot of that stuff. And at the end of this video, I'm going to kind of give my very early thoughts on the game because I have played it I would say about 15 hours. So I want to kind of give my very early thoughts on the game as well. So without further ado, let's rock. And to say that Hollow Knight has diehard fans would be an understatement. I personally thought that I was a fan of Metroidvanias, and I do really like the original as well. It's one of, if not the best Metroidvania ever made. I mean, it's not my personal favorite, but it is very, very good. But some of these diehard fans of the original game are on a completely different level. I mean, they are dedicated to this game, and I say that with the utmost respect. I love video games, and the fact that somebody could be so dedicated to one particular game is really interesting to me, and I definitely respect it. So for those particular people, and I mean, honestly, anybody that had been paying attention, the road to Silksong, the road to this sequel, has been a very long one, 7 years to be exact. And it definitely felt, especially in the last couple of years, it definitely felt like every big gaming showcase that came and went that didn't have a mention of Silksong or any kind of update about this sequel, it did kind of feel like fans were turning on the developer Team Cherry. To a certain extent, people were literally talking about this game as potential vaporware. Like it was never gonna come out, which I was never gonna go that far, but even I was starting to get my doubts that this game was ever gonna come out. It just felt like they would have told us something by now. And I kept seeing that release date of 2025, and we were getting very close to like October, and we hadn't even heard anything about it yet. And I was like, man, this game isn't going to come out in 2025. I don't think it's vaporware or anything like that. I definitely think eventually we're going to get it, but it's just taking them away longer than we thought because they're such a small team, whatever. Like I was making a lot of excuses, but I thought it was going to come out. And I had gotten to the point where I think most people had gotten to as well, which was I wasn't going to hold my breath for any updates about Silksong. And I certainly wasn't going to hold my breath for a release date anytime soon. Yes, we knew that there was a playable demo at Gamescom, but outside of that, I wasn't expecting any type of news. And I don't like to be wrong, but in this particular case, I was happy to be wrong because not only did we get more information from Gamescom, but we finally got a release date. And not only did we get a release date, but it was like 2 weeks from when they dropped the release date. We found out that this game was going to release on September 4th, and people were hyped. The release date trailer on Team Cherry's YouTube page has 5.6 million views and over 500,000 likes. But not everybody was super psyched about the quick turnaround between the release date trailer and the actual release date. And the perfect example of this is this article that was posted on Polygon on August 27th titled "The Gaming Industry Deserved More Lead Time Before Silksong." I will post a link to this article, to the full article, in the video description so you can read it yourself. But basically this article, I'll read the first paragraph and then I'll kind of just paraphrase it from there. It says, man plans, God laughs. Only in this case, God is a tiny bug with a really sharp sword. Hollow Knight Silksong comes out on September 4th, marking the conclusion of a years-long hype cycle. It comes out with just 2 weeks of advance notice. Already, no less than 5 games have shifted their planned release dates out of next week, some by months. I really only have just one question, guys. What the hell, you guys? And then the article goes on to detail all the different games that have shifted their release date to kind of make room for Silksong. But the surprising part of this article is actually how they ended it. And that is essentially they spent the second half of this article kind of complaining about not only did these developers and publishers not get advance notice, but places like Polygon and IGN and all of these big review sites also didn't get advance notice. And apparently, which I mean, it makes sense, I just never thought about it before. Apparently, they month to month will kind of plan out their review and coverage strategy going into the month. And so these surprise drops by games, especially a game as big as Silksong, dropping with only 2 weeks notice, is a pretty big deal to Polygon and IGN and all these big review sites. And while I can understand the frustration if you are an indie game developer or publisher that has put your blood, sweat, and tears into a particular game for years, and you're excited for your game to finally come out, and then this giant bomb gets dropped on you weeks before your game's about to come out, and you kind of have to shift your plans around, I can understand and sympathize with game developers and publishers for something like that. However, there is research to suggest that if you could wait like a month or two, and I know that's easier said than done, especially from my point of view as the consumer. I'm not the one that has put so much time and money into developing these games, but if you can wait a month or two, it might actually help you, especially if you happen to be making a Metroidvania, because this game has been such a hit that I imagine, yeah, there probably is a percentage of people that are just going to be absolutely obsessed with this game and are gonna dedicate their entirety of their gaming for at least the rest of the year and maybe even next year to just playing and replaying this game. But there's probably a majority of people that play this game that are going to play it like I play it, that play video games like I play video games, which is we like to play all different kinds of games. And I'm going to play this game, and I'm probably going to play it at least a couple of times throughout the rest of this year. But there are going to be other games that come out that I'm going to want to play. And I'm going to kind of move on to the next game. So it's not impossible. You don't have to indefinitely delay your game just because Silksong dropped this huge bomb. It's actually suggested that if you can wait a month or two, that it will actually help you out, because there might actually be a chunk of people, because Silksong has been such a hit, that this might be their first ever indie game. And this might kind of be their launching off point to get into indie games because they've enjoyed Silksong so much. So after they're done in a month or two with Silksong, they actually might look for other games like it. And they might be like, man, that indie game was really cool. Maybe I should try out all these other indie games. And you might actually benefit from Silksong if you can only hold out for like a month or two. Now, Polygon arguing that they should have had more lead time to kind of divvy out their resources as far as their journalists to cover this game versus other games. I don't know, man. That just seems like a bad look to me. This game has been such a hit that, what's the expression? A high tide rises all boats. People are playing this game and are obsessed with this game, that places like Polygon and IGN, yeah, maybe you're a little annoyed that you didn't get a heads up, but you're gonna get so much traffic from this game that maybe you should just shut up and just deal with the minor inconvenience at the beginning. Because I'm a tiny YouTuber. I'm microscopic in compared to like Polygon or IGN. But even I, just posting clips from me streaming and even streaming this game, I have seen an uptick in subscribers just from posting clips and streaming this game. So maybe you should just shut up and deal with it, because this game is going to get you clicks. People are going to come to your site because they're gonna want walkthroughs and tips and tricks and all that stuff, especially considering how difficult this game is. We'll get into that here in a little bit, but it just, I don't know, that part of the article just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because it's like, come on, grow up. It's not that big of a deal. I get it, it's an inconvenience, but in the long run, this game is going to give you way more traffic than this minor inconvenience might negatively impact you. And while I think the term breaking the internet is thrown out way too liberally, in this particular case, it's not an over-exaggeration. So this game won't have a physical release until sometime next year. So literally the only way that you can play Hollow Knight Silksong is digitally right now. And as soon as this game went live to purchase on each storefront, they all went down momentarily. Like literally so many people wanted to play this game and were waiting to play this game that the storefronts like Steam, Xbox, and Nintendo couldn't handle the traffic. And while most people like myself have been really digging this game, it's still listed as very positive on Steam. There has been a notable chunk of negative reviews as well. Now, of course, some of that can be chalked up to the fact that this is a huge deal in gaming right now and trolls like to troll. So some of those negative reviews can be contributed to just that. But there does seem to be a common denominator among a lot of these negative reviews, as highlighted in this article on thegamer.com, which of course I will link in the video description. But basically, to summarize this article, a lot of people are complaining about how difficult this game is, especially compared to the original game, which, to be fair, was already a very difficult game. But most negative reviews that did talk about the difficulty level mentioned a few things. Most notably, which we'll talk about this when I share my thoughts on the game, but the double damaging dealing enemies, the tricky platforming. There's also mentions of the game's scarce currencies, overwhelming boss fights, and even the charm system, which some think is a downgrade compared to the first game. Speaking of reviews, I did want to kind of put my 2 cents in on the end of this video. These are my very early impressions of Silksong. I'm currently roughly 15 hours into the game. I am currently streaming it every so often. So if you haven't already and you want to check out those streams, definitely consider subscribing. If you do subscribe, ding that bell. That way you're notified when I do go live. This was day 1 on Game Pass, so I've been able to play it on that. I've been playing it on my Xbox Series S. And I personally love Metroidvanias, and of course I hold the original game in high regard. It's not my personal favorite of the genre, but it's still a phenomenal game. In this sequel, you play as Hornet, a character from the first game, who has been kidnapped and transported to the mysterious land of Pharloom, where she learns of the Citadel and decides to make her way there to find some answers. And a big change from the original game to the sequel is Hornet, unlike the protagonist from the first game, has the ability to speak. And while I haven't gotten far enough in the game to kind of render a final verdict on the game's story and this particular character, that change is a welcomed one. I really dig Hornet's personality. Of course, in the mythology of Hollow Knight, which I'm not super well versed, but I do know a little bit about it, she's a princess. And she acts very much like I would think a warrior princess would act. She's very formal and polite, but she also wants to help civilians of Pharloom. But at the same time, she's of course a badass as well, and she doesn't take no shit. And I've really enjoyed her character so far. However, the biggest change between the two games isn't that Hornet can talk, it's the way that she moves. I should point out that I have played the original game a few times. I'm certainly not the diehard fan that I know a lot of you are. Therefore, I didn't find the changes as annoying as some of you will, depending on how much muscle memory you have from the first game. That being said, certain changes did take some getting used to. The biggest issue I had wasn't with the boss fights. More on that here in a second. The biggest issue, and I think a lot of the negative reviews also mention this, is the pogoing. That is such a big part of the platforming from the original game, is a lot more difficult. Honestly, at first, I didn't think you could even do it in the sequel because Hornet doesn't have a downward slash, and that's how you pogo in the original game. While she does have slashes, instead of going straight down, she goes down diagonal, which means you can still pogo, but you have to first aim Hornet in the right direction. And man, does that take a lot of getting used to. Honestly, I spent a good chunk of my Saturday stream just getting the hang of it. It was so frustrating. If you happen to watch that stream, you know I was kind of fluctuating on the verge of almost rage quitting or crying that entire time. Now, after a couple hours, I'm light years better at it than I was Saturday morning. I've gotten way more confident that I can pull it off on a consistent basis, but I would say 99% of the time in the first game, I pulled off the pogoing just fine. And now after all that practice, I could confidently say that maybe 80% of the time I will hit it in the sequel. And pogoing is such a big part of the platforming in this game, a game that is so punishing in other areas, that extra 14% of uncertainty could mean the difference between making it to a resting spot or having to backtrack again. Now, in Team Cherry's defense, apparently there is a crest that you can unlock that allows you to do a downward slash, but I personally haven't unlocked it yet, so I can't really speak to how well it works. But eventually, if this really bugs you, you can unlock that crest. Outside of the difficulty with the pogoing, the platforming has been really fun, especially after you get the cloak that allows you to float up the airstreams. I've been absolutely loving that so far. And of course, while you're platforming, you will also encounter smaller enemies that you can fight to recover silk or simply ignore. I would suggest fighting each enemy at least a couple of times because they may seem simple, and some of them are, but they all do have their own nuances, and those nuances become pretty important because occasionally you will come across these arena mini boss fights where you will fight several waves of these smaller enemies, and you'll be fighting them multiple enemies at a time. So it's good to know those nuances and get used to fighting those particular creatures before you're stuck in an arena with them. I should also point out that some of the negative reviews I do slightly agree with. It has been a minute since I have played the original game, but it does feel like these smaller enemies you encounter out and about are slightly tankier than the original game. It does seem like they take a couple of more hits to kill than in the original game. It's just a feel thing. I haven't tested it out or anything, but it does feel like they're a little bit tankier. And if that's true, that makes this game even more punishing, considering it takes a minute before you will be able to unlock your first mask shard, which upgrades your health. At least it took me a little bit before I was able to unlock it. Plus, another minor change from the original game is you use all of your silk to heal this time around. Plus, like we talked about with the negative reviews, most enemies actually hit for more damage. So all of those things combined make this game way harder than the original game. Now, you can heal in midair, so that does buy you some time. So there are some strategies that will help you out along the way, but any damage you take is very costly in Silksong. And of course, you don't just fight smaller enemies. You will eventually come across big bosses. Now, take this with a huge grain of salt. I am not an expert at these games at all. I am not saying this to be braggy. I am just giving you my honest opinion. I'm still early on, so maybe this changes. And I also play a lot of Soulsborne games, so I'm used to the trial and error way of beating bosses. That was a lot of qualifiers. So before you type out your negative comments, just know I'm not being braggy, but I don't feel like the bosses have been that bad. Again, still early in this game, so maybe I just haven't gotten to the very hard bosses yet, but in my experience, they haven't been that bad. The toughest one for me is honestly Skull Ant, and he really only gave me as much trouble as he did because I hadn't unlocked the sprint ability yet. I'd assume his big swipes are way easier to avoid with the sprint versus just having to jump out of the way. That being said, I have enjoyed the boss fights. They're just not as hard as I thought they would be. My personal favorite has been Fourth Chorus. Again, not super difficult, but the boss does take a few minutes, longer than I thought it would, to beat him. And I just love me a platforming boss. Platformers are my favorite genre. Of course, it's one of the reasons why I like Metroidvanias, because most Metroidvanias have a strong platforming element like Hollow Knight and Silksong. And I love boss battles that incorporate combat and learning the boss moves with also having to pay attention to platforming. And it certainly doesn't hurt that Fourth Chorus looks really, really cool. And honestly, that can be said about everything in Silksong across the board. This game is absolutely fucking beautiful. Each area is detailed and unique, which is great because if you're anything like me, you're gonna get lost a lot. You're gonna spend a lot of time backtracking through these areas. Whether you're lost or not, that's just how these games are designed. I should point out that I love the fast travel system that they implemented in Silksong with the Bell Beast. Not only do I like a good fast travel, but also it's cute as fuck. I love that Silksong is a 2D platformer, but does a great job making the environment feel real by layering the foreground and background with intriguing details. Yes, it's only 2D, but it feels layered. It feels like an actual world because you can see things in the background. You can see things in the foreground. There was so many cool details in this environment to just list in this video. This video would be an hour long, but my favorite little detail that I came across is there's an area with these like tiny little harmless bugs that kind of look like ants that won't do anything for you. You don't squash them or anything while you kind of walk around. They're just kind of there. And as you're killing these smaller enemies, they will literally carry the bodies away, the carcasses away, I'd assume to eat later. And I just thought that that was such a cool detail. So what's up here? Look at them just taking his body. That's so funny. I love that so much. There's so many cool details. Those little bugs taking his body away is so cool to me. I love that so much. All the creatures, no matter how small, look exceptional. In my opinion, Team Cherry is a shoo-in for best art direction at the upcoming Game Awards. Not sure if they'll actually win it, but if they're not nominated, we should riot. The music and sound design are also top notch, which should come as no surprise because like the first game, the music is composed by Christopher Larkin. And before I end this kind of mini review, I also want to point out that the performance of this game on my Xbox Series S has been flawless. I've had no frame rate issues or crashes whatsoever. Overall, I've been really digging this game. I don't think it's game of the year for me, but the fact that it's even in the conversation tells you how much I've really enjoyed this game. And again, I'm only about 15 hours into it. But as always, those are just my thoughts on Hollow Knight Silksong. I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below. I especially appreciate it if you did enjoy this video, which I assume that you did if you made it this far. Do me a huge favor and smash that like button, as the kids say. It's just a quick and easy way to tell YouTube that you enjoyed this video and they should push it to other people that might enjoy it as well. If you especially enjoyed this and you haven't already, definitely consider subscribing. If you do subscribe, ding that bell. I try to post weekly gaming related content, which you obviously dig if you made it this far in the video. So definitely consider subscribing and dinging that bell. Not only do I post weekly videos, or at least try to post weekly videos, I have been trying to post pretty consistent short content, and I've also started streaming again, as I've mentioned earlier in this video and last week's video. So I'm going to try to make that a fairly regular thing. So if you want to check that out and you like this content, definitely consider subscribing and dinging that bell. That way you're notified every time I post a video or I go live. But until next video, take it easy. What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and this is my boy Yoshi, aka Kitty Boy. And we were just talking, and we agree that since you made it this far in the video, you might as well subscribe. You wouldn't want to disappoint Kitty Boy, would you?